Awesome. I usually wait until 3 or 4 after, but this is a pretty good group here. Thanks for coming, everyone. I know some of you just got this information pretty last minute, so we appreciate you making it work. But we're super excited to be working with PAAR, who's the Pittsburgh Action Against Rape group, to help us make bars specifically more safe, but also our club seasons and our social events that are and may or may not be related to Pittsburgh Ultimate. So I will hand it over to them.
Awesome. All right. So I was going to say it's that good afternoon, good evening kind of space here. But it's nice to see folks. Thanks for hopping on. My name is Gail, and I work at PAAR, and my coworker Miranda is here. So we're going to kind of hop in and just talk a little bit and thinking about the places and spaces that you are in, and again, how can we make sure that those places and spaces are safe and fun for everybody? I think when you pull groups of people together, and you've got a lot of folks coming from different backgrounds and places and spaces interacting together, you can have a lot of differences going on of expectations and what one person thinks is fun and not, and just want to make sure everybody is on the same page so that that ultimate goal of hopefully having fun can happen for everybody in a safe space. All right. So I'm going to pop my screen up here. We hope that's a good thing. Stuff works. Yay. Always a good thing. All right. Are we seeing screen or? I never know. Are we seeing the presenter view?
I can see the PowerPoint. But
Yeah,
it's the presenter view.
That one better?
There it is.
There we go. Never know. Sometimes it pops up the thing, sometimes the presenter view. I never remember how it goes. All right. So please feel free, and hopefully folks will, I may ask folks to, chime in if you want to pop up comments or things in chat. If that feels comfortable, or any questions, please do that. Feel free to unmute yourself as well and chime in. You are not interrupting. Otherwise, I tend to just kind of talk away. So please feel free to hop in. It's always way more interesting when other folks are talking and not just me. So just to let you know, so we are PAAR, Pittsburgh Action Against Rape. So our mission is to respond, educate, and advocate to end sexual violence, kind of whatever that looks like. So if you are not familiar with who we are the local rape crisis center. We serve all of the city of Pittsburgh as well as all of Allegheny County. Our office is located over on the south side. We provide a wide range of services. Miranda and I work in prevention and outreach. So we go out into the community. We do programs with kids in schools, kindergarten through college. We do a wide range of community programs and community trainings, as well as professional trainings on a wide range of topics related to sexual harassment and sexual violence. The idea is really, helping people think about issues and thinking about how they can keep themselves and their community safe. We also offer victim response services. So if somebody is experiencing some form of sexual violence, we have folks that can help them in those crisis situations, whether that be at the hospital or is that reporting something to law enforcement and working through a court process. We also offer counseling services. All of our services are available regardless of somebody's ability to pay. So free services are available if that's something that folks need. Our helpline is available 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Certainly it's there for somebody who's in crisis, but also there for anybody to call to ask a question, get information, find out how to help a friend. And at our website at PAAR.net, there information there, as well as ways to connect with us via live chat and texting options as well. So lots of ways to connect with us as people need. All right, so let's kind of start with that question. So, we hear that term sexual violence, right? So what's the first thing that you think of when you hear that term? What's the first thing that comes to mind? If you want to pop something up in chat, if you want to unmute and just kind of shout things out, but like, what do we think of when we hear that term?
Uncomfortable.
Okay.
Invasive.
Yep. Okay, I like those. See, in chat, we've got abuse between partners in the home. Okay. Okay. Anything else that sort of pops to mind? Oh, I like that. Non-consensual physical harm. I like that. Okay. Okay. Taking advantage of someone who's drinking. Okay. Anybody else want to chime in with what we're thinking? Okay. All right. I like those. We get kind of a wide range there, and kind of, thinking about, how those words can make us feel, or how, they can make somebody feel, some definition kind of things. And I think it's just kind of, we hear those terms, just like what kind of comes to mind. I like that. Inebriated pressure. I like that. Right. And if we notice in a lot of those things, we're sort of running the gamut of a lot of different ideas and a lot of different things, that might come to mind. And I think that that's okay, because actually when we use sexual violence, we like to use that sort of as an umbrella term. And so there can be a lot of things that can fall underneath that umbrella, right? So if we take a look at this, we really want to think about sexual violence as being and sort of an umbrella term, really kind of encompassing any unwanted, sexual behavior. So any unwanted non-consensual sexual behavior, and really wanting to think about it as a range of behaviors that range from non-touch as well as touching behaviors. So that we're not just kind of thinking that, something is a problem if it has to have a physical component or a touch component for it to be a problem, but that there can be plenty of, unwanted sexual behaviors that involve no touch whatsoever that can be just as hurtful and just as harmful to somebody as the touch behaviors. So really kind of wanting to think about it as a really all-encompassing kind of term. And I think when we do that, that also, will help us think about, as we see behaviors or we see things happening, To really think much more about some of those feeling words that, is this behavior uncomfortable for somebody? Is this behavior making somebody feel uncomfortable, hurt, bad, embarrassed? If it's making somebody feel that way, that may not be okay in the place or space that we're in. And, that way, we're looking less at, well, is somebody touching somebody or not? And rather thinking about, how is this behavior making somebody feel in a space? And is that okay to be going on in this space? So whether it's happening to us, whether it's happening to somebody else, we can, look at that full range of behaviors. If we're thinking about, sexual harassment behaviors, certainly we can think about that as being any behavior that is unwanted and repeated. It's a behavior that maybe has been addressed. Hey, I don't like that. That crosses a line for me, but maybe somebody isn't getting that hint and just kind of keeps doing it again and again. Then that may fall into that sexual harassment category, which can also be a form of sexual violence as well. Peach, that's a really great question. What would be a non-abrasive way to confront these things if we notice them? And I think that's something that, we kind of all, we see things, we hear things happening and want to know, like, what do we say and what do we do? And we're actually going to talk a little bit about, like, how can we be a good bystander in a little bit. So thank you for the question, kind of jumping ahead, but we'll get there. Okay. That is kind of part of what we're going to talk about a little bit, and thinking about, like, how can we do that? All right. So we'll kind of get to that place in a little bit. All right. Because I think we do see things and hear things. It's not necessarily something happening to us, and we want to think about, like, how can we address something or say something, so that folks recognize that those behaviors might be a problem, right? So part of that then is thinking about, like how do we know when it is a problem for somebody? And so really what we want to think about first is thinking about somebody's boundaries and, kind of what people's boundaries are for situations. So what is a boundary? What's a boundary? What do we think of when we think of a boundary? What's a boundary?
It's an individual's comfort zone.
I like that, right? I like that. So some things we've got in chat, something someone shares as their limits, right? So we think about limits, a comfort level or a comfort zone. I like that. A standard set by yourself to feel comfortable, a line not to be crossed. I like all of these. These are awesome. Thanks, everybody, for chiming in. Yeah, right. So we're really kind of thinking about, how we set a boundary that really separates what's ours from everything else. It's the limits that we set for ourselves and others. The thing to remember about boundaries is that they're different depending on, the situation that we're in, the people that we're with, our comfort level in any, kind of situation, our mood, right? So that means that boundaries are constantly changing, that they're not static, that they're not just, written in stone, and that's what they're going to be forever and ever and ever. A big thing is thinking about what's appropriate or inappropriate for the situation that we're in, and that's always changing. Things that might be acceptable in a workplace, right, and things we might do at work might be completely different when we're in a social situation. How we interact with one group of friends might be completely different than how we interact with a different group of friends, based on, the people that are there, the situation that they're in. But we want to make sure that those boundaries are there because they do help people feel safe in a variety of situations. And that boundaries are always sort of that real basic thing that we want to make sure that we are paying attention to, right? Because that sets a tone of respect. If I know your boundaries, I know what behavior is okay with you. I don't have to guess. And if you know and respect my boundaries, I can feel safe and comfortable in a situation. And so when we have those basic kind of boundaries in place, we can really set tones of respect. Aha. So how do we understand and ask someone's boundaries? And that's really the key there, is thinking about is about asking, right? How do we have conversations with people? How do we make sure that we are checking in and asking? Because we want to make sure that we're not assuming boundaries. So in any interaction that we're in, we need to make sure that we are checking in with folks, because those are those basics of consent, actually. And so, anytime we have an opportunity to ask, we need to do that. Absolutely, right? Because crossing boundaries is not, again, just about physical space. We have a lot of different boundaries that are happening for folks, and making sure that we are paying attention to, kind of where are those lines, and recognizing that everybody's lines are different. And so it is needing to have a conversation. It is needing to talk and ask and get to know somebody, and not just assume that what's okay for me is going to be okay for everybody else. I think that a lot of times that's where complications happen, is when we start making some of those assumptions. And I think that sometimes those assumptions happen, especially when we're in kind of common groups, right? So you have a common thing that brings you all together. It's Pittsburgh Ultimate, right? And the activity you are participating in. And so we can sometimes get into a place where we assume that, oh, well, if everybody is here, then we must have sort of, everything in common. You all have something in common, right? But that doesn't mean that we have everything in common, that everybody's exactly the same. And so we want to make sure that we're still having some of those conversations, and creating those relationships with each other. And so one of the things that's super important that we do is that, we're paying attention, that if a boundary has been crossed, that it's up to us to really pay attention, and that we're not just assuming that what we're doing is okay, that we're making sure that we have that consent piece, which we're going to kind of define a little bit better in a minute, but really thinking about, how do I tell if somebody's boundary has been crossed? We want to pay attention to body language, facial expressions, eye contact, body positioning. It might, for some people, it's not necessarily a verbal thing, for a variety of reasons, that somebody might not feel comfortable to say no or stop or, hey, I don't like that. But we can read some of that body language. We also do want to respect a no or not interested. For whatever reason, somebody is not interested in something. And, if somebody says no, or somebody says they're not interested, or, they're backing away or moving away from something, we need to respect that. That's not an invitation to, try harder or to pressure somebody into something. And it's not an invitation to try harder. It's not an invitation to, let's see if I can change that no to a yes. But hey, I need to really respect that. I think that's something that we need to make sure that we are paying attention to, and making sure that others are paying attention to as well. It's not sort of a challenge to keep pushing forward, because that can then make people feel even more uncomfortable in a situation. And I don't think most people want to do that. But unfortunately, it can sometimes be seen in that way, and making sure that, you know, we're just respecting that space and respecting, you know, somebody setting a boundary and not feeling comfortable in the moment. Making sure also too that, you know, we are responding rather than reacting. Nobody likes to be told no, right? We don't like being told no, or we don't like being told that we're not, you know, somebody's not interested. You know, nobody likes being rejected. So how do we make sure that we are sort of responding to that person rather than kind of reacting and getting defensive about something? You know, take a breath. Nobody's perfect. We are all going to cross a boundary at some point in time, and making sure that we can just kind of take that breath, recognize, hey, I made a mistake. Nobody's perfect. Don't downplay it. And act, you know, oh, wasn't that big of a deal, and, you know, whatever. Just take a breath. It's their perception of the situation, right? It's just a different boundary. It doesn't, you know, it's just different. It's not wrong. It's just different, right? Making sure that we can apologize for something. If we make a mistake, let's own it and apologize for it, for what we did. It will, believe me, it will make a world of difference to somebody. Taking a second in our own mind to examine our behavior, right? And kind of, you know, just ask ourselves, like, hey, was it appropriate for the place or space? Did it cross a boundary, right? Maybe you were okay with it, but seeing it from that other person's point of view, I think, is really important. And just to be like, you know, okay, like, I didn't mean it that way, but I can understand how they saw it, right? Like I said, you might not have meant it in a hurtful way, but that person took it that way. That's their perception, right? So all we can do is take that as an opportunity to learn, to say, wow, like, I can see how somebody thought that I meant it a different way, or, you know, I you know, took it in the way that they did. Okay, right? Like, I can see that. I need to take that as an opportunity to learn and to change the behavior, right? Maybe that's, you know, maybe what I thought is funny turns out it's really not. Maybe it's a little bit insensitive. Maybe it's not appropriate for this place or space, and I need to change it for this place or space. And if we need to, you know, that we can seek guidance from somebody. You know, if we're concerned about what we did, if we need to seek guidance about it, you know, if we need to talk to a friend about what happened, you know, we can certainly do that, but making sure that we can recognize that. And like I said, take that as an opportunity to learn and change the behavior. Because in that way we are responding to somebody, rather than, you know, kind of, you know, reacting in a real defensive kind of way, and almost, you know, like attacking the person for their boundary. Everybody's allowed to have their own boundaries about things. They might be different than yours, and that's okay, right? But we want to make sure that we're not attacking somebody for the boundary that they have, but rather that we can respect that boundary. So, you know, how do we make sure that we aren't crossing boundaries? And we're at that idea of consent, right? And making sure that we have consent from somebody. So anytime we can have a conversation, anytime we can ask is important. You know, and whether that's something small like, hey, can I, you know, sit next to you? Is this seat taken? Right? Like, can I have a seat? Can I join in? Right? To things that are much more, you know, personal. You know, we want to make sure that we can ask and have those conversations. Because the absence of no, you know, I think people automatically assume that consent is just as simple as yes and no. And, you know, oh, well, if somebody doesn't say no, it must be okay. But in reality, that might not necessarily be all there is to it. That there can be a lot of gray area in there. And so, you know, making sure that we're having those conversations, making sure that we are, you know, building those relationships with folks, you know, is a way to make sure that we have consent, and making sure then that we're not crossing boundaries, you know, by accident, or doing things that could be hurtful to others. Absolutely. Consent is more than just yes or no, right? We want to make sure that we have, you know, full consent from somebody. So consent really needs to make sure that it is freely given. You know, that it is a choice somebody is making, and they are doing that without being pressured, forced, manipulated. But it's something that they want to do because they want to do it, whatever it is. That it's reversible. Turns out people change their mind about things, right? We change our minds all the time, and that's okay. But that we need to make sure that we are respecting that, you know, somebody changing their mind. That again, that's not an invitation to try to pressure somebody to change their mind. That, hey, cool, right? You changed your mind. Not a big deal, not a problem. It's informed. We can only consent to something if we have the full story, if we have all the information available, right? So we want to make sure that, you know, somebody has that informed consent. If they don't have all the information and they said yes, then we might get somebody changing their mind. And again, that's okay. It should be enthusiastic. If somebody wants to do something, they should want to do it, right? So we would hope that that's a yes, but anything else, you know, can leave a question mark there. Certainly if somebody says no, that's not enthusiastic. But if we're getting anything else, if we're getting maybe, I'm not sure, kinda, or somebody gets kind of real quiet, those things are somebody who's questioning. They're not sure that they want to do this or not. They're in a questioning space. And we might need to let that person have some space to figure out, am I okay with this or not? And so they might need us to take a step back. Maybe they need some more information to be able to make a choice. But, you know, again, this is that space where we want to allow them to do what works for them and figure that out, and not feel that pressure, or not feel forced to make a choice that they're really not okay with. And it also needs to be specific, right? Each thing that somebody wants to do or that's going on, we need to make sure that we have consent for, right? So if a situation is changing, we need to make sure that we still have consent. Saying yes to one thing is not sort of a blanket consent for everything that's going to happen, because it turns out that situations change. And I might be okay with something, you know, at the beginning of, you know, hey, we're all partying and it's, you know, we're having fun at the beginning of the night. I've had a few drinks. You know, hey, the night's gotten a little later and I'm tired now. And because things have changed, my consent might change along the way, or my ability to give consent, especially if we're adding alcohol to a situation, my ability to give consent may have changed. So we need to make sure that, again, we are talking, we are asking, we are, you know, checking in with folks as situations change, to make sure that consent is still there, that the person is still able to consent. And I think that that's a really important thing that we keep in mind when we're thinking about that consent piece. So we want to make sure then that consent is, you know, we've often heard that, you know, no means no, and certainly no does mean no, right? But yes doesn't always just mean yes, right? And that there are those shades of gray there. So we want to make sure that we are paying attention to that body language, paying attention to, you know, is somebody intoxicated or not? And that we're really checking in with people, and not only with other people, that we're also checking in with ourselves, right? because you certainly are giving consent to something or not. And making sure that we are checking in with ourselves, making sure that we are checking in with other people to say, hey, is this still okay? Is everything still okay with folks? Because if something changes along the way, then we want to make sure that we can take that step back and say, okay, something has changed. What has changed? Is this situation still okay? How do we make sure that it is for this person? So they are still in a place of yes. And if they're not, then how do we make sure that they are still safe and comfortable with what's going on? And that's really, really important, that we are always kind of doing those check-ins for folks. We want to make sure that consent is never assumed. That, you know, body language, how somebody is dressed, nonverbal communication, is there any flirting that's happening or going on? That, you know, those things might be happening because somebody's having fun or somebody likes somebody, but that doesn't automatically mean that we have consent for something. Relationships. Being in a relationship with somebody doesn't automatically give somebody consent, or having a past relationship with somebody doesn't necessarily imply consent. That's a good question, right? So how do we differentiate a conversation between nagging about how somebody's feeling compared to really checking in on them, right? And I think that might be sort of how we approach it. You know, and is that something that hey, I want to check in on somebody to make sure that they are okay. And is that something that we might pull somebody aside or say, hey, can I talk to you for a second? And, you know, we're sort of asking the question and being specific about why we're doing that. Rather than sort of in a, you know, there's a whole bunch of people around and we're sort of just kind of, you know, hey, are you okay? You know, and we're sort of doing it in a much more casual way. And it feels like, why do you keep asking? I think people read those situations a little bit differently, but if it's genuine concern that we want to check in on what's happening with somebody, that tends to happen a little better if we're sort of pulling people aside, and really saying, like, why am I having this concern? Like I'm seeing this happening. Like, it seems like you've had a lot to drink, and I just want to check in to make sure that you're okay. Right. So we're sort of defining why we have concern. You know, or, you know, and so, you know, is there something that you've observed as a bystander, which we're going to talk about in a second, right? So maybe we've observed something happening where somebody looks like they're really uncomfortable with a situation. So it might be sort of, you know, hey, can I talk to you for a second? And we're kind of pulling somebody out of a situation and maybe saying, like, you looked a little uncomfortable, or that seemed a little bit uncomfortable. I just wanted to check in and see if you were okay. And that person might be like, yeah, everything's fine. Great, wonderful. Or they might be like, thank you so much for, you know, kind of pulling me out of that situation. Like, that person has been, you know, bugging me. You know, they're not getting the hint that I'm not interested. Great, right? So I think it's when we have that genuine concern, I think sometimes pulling somebody away versus kind of doing something that somebody might interpret as being embarrassing in front of a group of people, or kind of a constant kind of thing that it's like, it doesn't feel genuine. I think is sometimes where that line can be. Absolutely. And again, you know, checking in on folks when any kind of alcohol is involved is always important, I think, because, you know, people may not recognize, because of alcohol, you know, what's going on, what's happening, that maybe things, you know, seem like they're getting a little bit out of control. you know, because alcohol is involved, and that lowers people's inhibitions, and it also can, you know, makes it more difficult to read situations that are happening. And it might take somebody outside looking in to say, maybe this isn't as safe as it could be. And that there are others who are concerned about safety, especially if they are involved, you know, in an event that you have going on where you want folks to be safe. Because what's okay outside of that situation might not necessarily be okay within the context of your, you know, event that's going on, and wanting to make sure, hey, in this event, we want everybody to be safe. And maybe somebody's a little too intoxicated right now, you know, to be disappearing with somebody. And we're going to express a different level of concern than if, you know, if somebody was in their, you know, home, or, you know, hanging out with other friends in a different kind of setting where that kind of concern may or may not be there.
Could I say something?
Yes, absolutely.
This is LVP. I use she, her pronouns. We can also have conversations with people that look like they might be on the other side of things. We don't always have to have a conversation with a person that might or might not be giving consent. It's the other person that we can also talk with.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Right. You know, if we feel comfortable doing that, you know, we can absolutely have that conversation as well. Because again, sometimes people aren't recognizing that what they are doing is a problem, right? They may not recognize that what they're doing you know, is maybe pushing a boundary, is, you know, maybe they're pushing a little too hard. And, you know, we can have that conversation as well. Absolutely. Absolutely. Right. And I think most people, we want to help in situations, but maybe we don't feel comfortable. So what are some reasons people don't intervene in situations? Because we see things going on, we hear things happening, things that we might kind of raise our awareness, that we're like, ooh, is that situation okay? I'm not sure. But maybe we don't know how, or there are things that kind of get in the way. Yeah, I think that's a big one, right? Scared that we might be harmed, you know, that something might happen to us. I think that's a really good reason why people don't get involved. Why don't we get involved in situations? Any other reasons why? We've got. Yes. I don't want to be seen as, you know, the no fun police, right? And when it's a social group, right? We often think about that social safety that are going on. Yep, we don't know the people or their boundaries. So, you know, we may wonder, like, is this okay for them? I might be uncomfortable, but maybe they're okay with it, right? Yes, that wrong read on a situation. You know, I might be wrong. Yes, goodness, yes, we don't want to be seen as the snitch, right? Yeah, we're unsure, right? Is this okay? Is this not? I'm not sure. Right? We don't want to have a confrontation happen, you know, because there was a misunderstanding and suddenly it escalates into something else, and that wasn't the intent. Absolutely, right? There can be a lot of reasons why. And so we hear, right, a lot of these kind of statements about why people may or may not get involved in something. And these are all valid reasons. These are all things that people say, and, you know, valid things about why people may or may not get involved in situations, that we have these barriers. I always look at barriers as not being a complete roadblock. It's kind of like, you know, oh, you know, wow, I don't want somebody getting angry or upset with me, so I'm just going to walk away and do nothing, right? But rather it might be, okay, I don't want somebody to get mad at me. So that might not be the best choice. Is there another way for me to intervene? Is there another way for me to help out in this situation? Maybe a confrontation isn't the best way for me, but is there something else I can do? So I think it's looking at barriers as more of a, this direction doesn't work, but is there a different direction that I can take? And certainly assessing safety is always really important. And that came up in chat, right? Whether that be our physical safety in a situation, I am probably not going to intervene in something if it's, some really big guy, or if there's two guys that look like they're going to get into something, I'm probably not hopping in the middle of that. I'm not pulling out my Superman cape. But we also too want to think about social safety, right? Within a social group and how we intervene. We don't want to be seen, like I said, like as the no fun police or the snitch. We also, think about kind of that social standing we have. If we're calling out somebody that is seen as popular, and how does that hurt us within a group? That can be important. We also too want to think about a victim's safety. That person might not like what's happening, but if we are calling it out very publicly, then that could be detrimental to them too. And they might be like just leave it alone, it's fine, right? So that's why it can be really important to think about, are they okay with it, and checking in with that person and how they want it handled or dealt with. Even though we ourselves, we might be thinking, oh my gosh, I would totally yell at this person and go off on them. That person, the person who actually is experiencing it might be like, just let it go. I would rather handle it differently, or handle it later, or something, quietly kind of thing. And so our way of intervening is really important to think about for somebody in that idea of respecting somebody's boundaries. So we want to think about a variety of things that we can do to intervene, right? If we feel safe and comfortable doing it, and if the person's okay with it, sure, we can directly say something to the person who is crossing the boundary, who is doing the behavior. We can absolutely do that. It doesn't have to be a shouting match, right? I think we think direct has to be a confrontation, like I'm yelling and screaming at somebody. It doesn't have to be. It can be just we are directly saying something to the person. But like I said, it doesn't have to be a shouting match. But it can also be directly saying something to that person who is experiencing the behavior too. To ask them, if they're okay, or directly saying something to them about it too. I don't necessarily have to engage the person who is participating in the behavior, but I can say something who is experiencing what's going on. It could be creating a distraction, right? It's something to change the topic of conversation, because we can tell this conversation is going down a bad road. So how do we redirect the conversation? How do we pull somebody out of a situation, get them away from somebody? I always say women have kind of a built-in distraction, because women always go to the bathroom in groups, in pairs, that kind of thing. So to ask somebody like, hey, can you show me where the bathroom is? Or can you come with me? Right? We have we always have that built-in kind of thing. But that can be a way to get somebody away from a situation, out of a situation, and then ask them, hey, are you okay? Hey, that, you looked a little uncomfortable. Did I read that wrong? Right? You looked a little uncomfortable with what was going on. That can be helpful. Delegating a situation. Maybe you're not the person to handle something. So, do we need to get somebody else involved? So this is one where, do we need to get staff involved in a situation? Somebody sort of higher up, that's, at the place or space that you are in, to make sure folks are safe. As a team leader, that might be who you are. That somebody comes to you, they're delegating something to you. So, kind of being in that position to handle that. Do you have somebody to delegate to? So is there other staff with Pittsburgh Ultimate that you're like, hey, this really isn't me either. Like, I need to ask some other staff what's going on to make sure that folks are safe. It also could be a delay. Maybe this isn't the time or the space to address something. You know, and that this could be one too, that maybe later we're not letting somebody off the hook, but maybe we're asking somebody later when there isn't a full audience around, when there aren't a whole lot of people around, that if we said something could be embarrassing for them, that we just kind of ask them like, hey, what was up? What was going on there? You know, you made this comment and that seemed a little uncomfortable, you know, wasn't really funny, right? But it's in a quieter space where maybe somebody doesn't feel as called out, where they, you know, where it could turn into a confrontation and to escalate something into a confrontation that doesn't need to happen. And certainly if there's a need to document something, you know, we certainly can do that. If need be, is that, you know, taking a picture, is that saving, you know, a text message, an email, you know, some sort of messaging that needs to be kept as well, that may need to happen. But remembering that intervention does not have to be some big heroic thing or a challenge or a conflict. Sometimes using space as a deterrent is helpful. You know, if you see something going on, you know, sometimes just moving over in a direction to maybe stand closer to what's happening, to making sure that, hey, did I hear that right? So I'm going to move myself over there, or moving a couple people over, like, hey, this seems to be happening because there's just one or two people and I'm concerned somebody's really intoxicated. Like, let's kind of walk ourselves over there and just kind of see what's happening and monitoring what's happening. You would be surprised how helpful that can be, because that lets somebody know that, wow, people see and hear what's happening. Maybe I need to change my behavior because there's people around. Or if somebody needs that ability to talk to somebody, reach out to somebody, you're putting yourself in a position that they can reach out if they need to. Making sure that we're balancing that idea of experience versus harm, right? Everybody should have fun and enjoy the experience, right? We want people to have fun. We're not there to be the no fun police, right? But in the same breath, we want to make sure that somebody is not creating a space that's harmful to others. They don't have the right to do that. So how do we have that balancing act? And, you know, that if somebody changes their, you know, somebody could be doing something, it's not okay, right? And if that behavior is kind of called out and they're, you know, hey, that's not okay, and they change their behavior, that's great, right? They're changing their behavior so that everybody else can have, so we can continue to have fun. That's a good thing if somebody changes their behavior, right? Versus, is somebody repeatedly doing something, right? So somebody has said something to them, maybe multiple people have said something and somebody's not changing their behavior. Now this is becoming a problem of harm. Like this is now creating a space that's uncomfortable for people, and that's not okay. So we want to make sure that we're doing that balancing act of allowing people to have fun. But again, if somebody is insisting on creating a space that's harmful for others, you know, and they're not changing their behavior and it's continuing to be a problem, that's not okay to be going on. And so making sure that those things get addressed. So how do we step in situations, right? So we got a couple scenarios here, and just thinking about, like, what could we say, what could we do in these situations to make them better? Okay, so we've got a small group of people are hanging out, they're drinking, dancing after a long, a day out in the sun. So a group of friends are having a good time when someone else enters the area where they are dancing. After a few minutes, the newcomer starts to dance really close to one person, putting their hands on that person's hips. That person moves away, kind of shifts a little bit, but that newcomer follows and starts dancing close again. Okay. So is there anything concerning going on here? Is there anything, what could you do as a bystander? What do we think's going on here? How could we be, you know, kind of helpful, proactive? What are we doing in this situation? Let's see, we've got in chat. Aha. Yeah, so that could be something helpful, right? So surrounding the friend with other friends, right? So that using space as a deterrent. Yeah, that could be really helpful. Okay. Anything else we could do? Absolutely, right? Asking the person if they're okay, right? Yeah, because you may have a different read on what's happening. So you might just check in with them to see if they're okay. That person might be like, no, it's fine. It's not that big of a deal. I'll just move away from them. Okay, great, right? But you've let them know that you've noticed what's happening. And that way, if their plan of staying away from this person doesn't work, they know that, hey, like you said something, it's on your radar too. I could come to you for some help, right? Yeah, I like that, right? Breaking up the one-on-one situation by, by engaging, talking to people, right? Having some more folks come over. Yeah, if it's not too loud, start a conversation, right? This person is a newcomer to this particular group of friends, like talk to that person. Hey, how are you? What's up? And getting them talking could be really helpful. And then that eliminates that one-on-one kind of situation that seems like maybe it's not going real well. Absolutely. Okay. We also might watch this and think like, maybe it's, maybe there isn't a need to step in yet. Okay, great. But it's on our radar. So are we just kind of paying attention, right? Yeah, we might ask the person to go get a drink or go to the bathroom with you, right? To separate them from that one-on-one kind of situation. Then we can ask them if, hey, are you okay? Were you okay with what was going on? If they were, great. Like, hey, let's go back, let's get a drink, let's go to the bathroom, let's go back and hey, let's keep having fun, right? If they were okay with it, no harm, no foul, right? But we've let that person know that, I saw what was happening. And if you do need help, you can ask, right? You can, kind of come over. Absolutely. Awesome. Yeah. Engage with the newcomer, to understand their intention, why they're there, who they know, right? Like just take an opportunity to just get to know who this person is and kind of what's up. Maybe they're just looking for a friend. They're looking for some folks and they just thought that you all look fun, right? And we just kind of want to see like who they are and what's up. Yeah, so we're just kind of putting the person on the radar screen to see what's happening. And I think that's a great way to make a friend, as well as to just kind of put this situation on a radar screen to pay attention to. And that might be what we do, right? We might not feel like there's a need to step in right away, but we might be like, you know what, I'm just going to kind of watch this person, just see how they interact with people. Maybe they're just a little awkward until they get to know folks. Okay, right? But we're paying attention and we're not just kind of letting it just, oh, it's not that big of a deal. Okay, let's try this one. So you all are hanging out after the tournament, having some drinks. After a while, Morgan and Riley join you. Morgan seems intoxicated and is starting to slur some words, but Riley keeps getting them both drinks. After some small talk, Morgan and Riley break off from the group. Riley is stumbling a little bit as they move away from the group at large towards a more quiet spot. How are we feeling about this one? Is there anything we would say, do? How are we feeling? What's going on with this one? Alcohol can always be a kind of a concern point, right? You know, suddenly we add alcohol and that can change situations very rapidly. So I think it's something to definitely kind of put on a radar screen for sure. Yeah, we might want to offer Riley some water, you know, making sure folks are, you know, maybe they need a water break instead of, you know, kind of, you know, more alcohol. Yeah, walking with them, you know, maybe kind of checking in to see like where are they going? Where did they go? You know, is everybody okay with what's happening in this situation? You know, checking in on somebody's intoxication level here could be helpful. Yeah, because once we start adding alcohol to situations, that can change them pretty quickly. So maybe making sure that these folks are on somebody's radar screen. You know, we're checking in to see where they're going. How private is this getting? Is everybody okay with what's happening? You know, and especially if somebody is stumbling and slurring words, you know, how drunk are they? Maybe we need a, you know, kind of a cutoff and kind of checking in on folks, you know, through the evening to make sure that they are still okay with what's happening and what's going on. So that, you know, somebody isn't in a situation that could turn non-consensual. And, you know, hopefully that does hit folks' radar screens. Absolutely. All right. So just to kind of wrap up here, you know, if somebody does tell you that something is happening or something has happened that they're uncomfortable with, no matter what level it is, right? If it's that person who's, you know, oh my gosh, like we're dancing and I'm not interested, but they just seem to be following me around and they won't leave me alone, right? Or is it something more serious? You know, the most important thing we can do is to believe that person, to listen, to support them, to believe them. I think is the most important thing that we can do for somebody. You know, that we're not being judgmental, that we're not, you know, blaming them for something they did or didn't say or do, and just make sure that we are being there and being supportive. You know, what we say is not that complicated. It's not really rocket science, right? But just letting somebody know, wow, I'm really sorry that happened to you, and I'm really glad you trusted me enough to tell me, right? I think that that's really helpful. Asking somebody like, what do they want to do? You know, is it something that they want to talk to staff about and report to somebody? You know, is this something that, you know, hey, I just needed to vent and talk to somebody? Great. You know, do you need somebody to go with them? You know, do they need somebody to go with them because they want to talk to that person about some, you know, boundary crossing, but they don't feel safe doing it on their own? Great. I'll come with you and be that support person, right? But figuring out what that person needs, I think, is really helpful, and making sure that we can help and support them with that is often the most important thing that we can do for somebody. Because people often feel very alone in situations and feel scared. And to have that support, I think, is so very helpful in any situation. And anytime we can do that for somebody, then I think that can go a long way. Absolutely. Okay. Any other questions? Any comments? Anything? Okay. Hopefully that this is something that, you know, just kind of puts some of these ideas on our screen, right? Yep. And I think sometimes that obtuse reaction, you know, kind of happens because I think, honestly, people aren't used to other people getting involved, like looking out for somebody, getting involved and caring, unfortunately, right? So I think if we get that kind of like, why are you getting involved kind of thing. It could be just because they aren't used to that. I think it's okay to express concern. I think it's okay to, you know, be like, hey, I was concerned. And we get those reactions from other people because we just aren't used to people being genuinely concerned. As long as we're doing it from a place of genuine concern, you know, I think it's okay. Unfortunately, you're going to get a reaction like that. Derek, I think that's a really good thing. Like having a secondary or third bystander present can usually help. Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, having things with a buddy, I think, can be really helpful. So maybe somebody isn't seeing you as being like, why are you this weird person? Turns out I'm not weird. Turns out I'm just somebody who's concerned. You know, and it's unfortunately kind of sad that, you know, we think that that's weird that people would be concerned. Right. But hopefully, you know, again, in the idea of your event, that, you know, you can kind of put that out there like, hey, we want everybody to have a fun event and we want everybody to have a good time. Right. And so that's why I'm concerned. Absolutely. Yeah. And that somebody, those things can happen too, right? That somebody still can feel hurt or still feel unsafe, even after behavior has changed. And again, we can't control other people's feelings about something. You know, I think we can acknowledge that, you know, this person has maybe changed their behavior, but trust may have already been violated for that person, right? Like they did this, I don't trust them anymore. And that can happen, right? And so, you know, in some ways that might be a situation where somebody just kind of needs to, you know, how do we stay separated from that person? How do we stay away from that person until maybe they can see that, you know, hey, yeah, they have changed behavior and, you know, can I trust them again? Or can I have at least, I might not fully trust them, but can I have a level of trust to be like, okay, they've changed behavior. Maybe I don't feel completely comfortable with them, but I do see that they have changed behavior. And that can certainly happen as well. And that sometimes that takes some time for folks. You know, and you know, we can't control how somebody feels, but hopefully they can get to that place to see that, yes, there has been a change in behavior. Absolutely. Okay. All right. Well, I hope this was helpful and useful for folks and, you know, just gave you all something to think about as you're going into an event, certainly being team leaders, you know, and just making sure that, you know, bottom line, folks are having fun, right? I would hope that's what we want, and just kind of figuring out like how we can ensure that people are safe and fun. Absolutely. Okay. So thank you all very much.
Thank you so much for being here.
You're welcome. You're welcome. Absolutely. And I believe Miranda is going to be around for the session tomorrow night at 7. So you'll see Miranda again tomorrow.
Awesome. Sounds great.
Okay. Awesome.
Thank you.
All right. Have a good night.
Have a good night.